whilst we're getting the slides up, I'll just, as I said, I'm the sector lead for agri-food here at BSI. I'm Sarah. Put all your questions in the Q&A, and at the end, hopefully we'll have time to unmute people and chat. I'm very excited to be able to introduce you to our session lead for today, Dr. Liz Goodwin, who is a chemist by background and started her career in the chemical industry. She joined the very influential Waste and Resources Action Programme, WRAP as it's known, in 2001, and was CEO there from 2007 until 2016, when she joined the World Resources Institute as Senior Fellow and Director for Food Loss and Waste. And BSI still works very closely with WRAP, and in fact we've got input into our, input and the chair from for our UK Food Loss and Waste Committee from WRAP, Richard Swan, that is. Anyway, we're very excited to have Liz here today. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the impact of food waste on climate and net zero, because we all know about that, and Liz is going to cover off quite a lot of information about the impact of food loss and waste, and what the committee, the new ISO TC 34 SC20 committee, as it is known, food loss and waste, is planning to do about it, is planning to do in order to help those who want to make a difference in this space. So over to you, Liz, once we've got the slides up.
Please bear with. I'm having problems on my end now. Please bear with while I'm just trying to put this together.
Perfect.
There they are.
They're going to come up. There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, thank you. So hello everybody, and I'm sorry about the technical issues. So I've just got a few slides to talk about the overall issue of food loss and waste, and why it was felt important to develop an ISO standard, and where we've got to in that process. So that's just my title slide. So maybe move on to the next slide, please. So the current scale of the problem is really massive, and it's a sort of one of those shocking things that a lot of people don't know about. So it's estimated we lose or waste around a third of everything that's produced. So it essentially either gets lost somewhere between the farm and coming to the market, or we waste it in our households. That costs nearly $1 trillion every year. It represents around 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And when we're also worried about greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, it is bonkers that more people don't realize that nearly 10% comes from food loss and waste, not just from food loss and waste. And it means we're wasting a quarter of all the water that's used in agriculture. And when you see daily on the news at the moment, pictures of drought in places in Africa, and you think that we're wasting a quarter of everything that's used in agriculture. It's totally shocking. So next slide, please. And loss and waste happens all along the supply chain. And we talk about different terms, loss and waste. So waste is when it's right at the end. So it's retail and households. And loss is when it's further back in the supply chain. But it happens everywhere. So on the farm, they may have poor harvesting practices, which mean there's a lot of waste, a lot of loss, or they don't have enough cold storage, or the road infrastructure is not great. And so loss happens there. Loss happens through processing and packaging. If they're growing, for example, potatoes that bruise easily, then they get damaged during the processing and they never make market. And then we get lost because of selections around quality. The fact that everybody wants to have straight carrots means an awful lot of carrots still get lost. And then we as householders and in businesses waste a lot of food. And in fact, in the UK, it's estimated around 70% of all the food loss and waste that occurs in the UK borders comes from our household. So us as householders is a big problem in the UK. Next slide, please. And just to put it into a bit of context, if food loss and waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter after China and the USA. And as I said, you know, it's a big number, 8%. It's actually around if you look at pre-pandemic figures, because during the pandemic the figures were not really realistic, but it is around 7 times global aviation pre-pandemic levels. So people worry about flying, but they don't worry about food loss and waste, and we need to change that. Next slide, please. And at the same time, you've got all this food being wasted, and you've got 1 in 9, 1 in 10 people remaining malnourished and suffering with food shortages, and that's only likely to get worse with things like the food crisis that's likely to arise as a result of Ukraine. And the next slide, please. So there are lots of benefits of trying to reduce food loss and waste. You know, there's socially, you know, improving food security for a growing population, meaning that we can feed hungry people. Environmental, protecting the natural resources, all that land that's used to grow food that's ultimately wasted. It's estimated it's around an area of land that covers an area the size of China is used to produce food that we just never actually see or eat. And we can contribute to reducing climate change. So many, many environmental benefits. And then economic, increasing efficiency, avoiding unnecessary costs. I mean, you can think about the benefits to even back to the farmer, that they get more income because they've actually managed to get more of their crop to the marketplace. And the next slide, please. And back in 2015, when the United Nations was setting the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 12.3 is all around food loss and waste. So SDG 12.3 aims to halve global food waste at retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains. And so that was a target that was set. And at the time, a group of leaders, of which I was one, was set up to form a group called the Champions 12.3, and we are champions to try to make sure that SDG 12.3 is achieved. So that's what I spend most of my time doing at World Resources Institute. And the next slide, please. And we reckon that there's a very simple approach to actually achieving SDG 12.3, and that is Target, Measure, Act. So we want as many countries and as many companies as possible to set targets in line with SDG 12.3. We want them then to measure, because as soon as you measure, you see where the problems are, and you can manage the solutions, and you can identify the hotspots in supply chains where food loss and waste occurs, and you can take action to address those hotspots. And it naturally drives action. So that Target, Measure, Act is applicable wherever you are in the supply chain. And so fundamental to that whole strategy is measurement. And one of the things we've been trying to do is to get as many people as possible to measure. The next slide, please. And increasingly, numbers of companies are setting targets and measuring, and this is just a snapshot. The slide itself is probably about a year old, so there will be more adding on to that. And you know, lots of company names that you'll recognise in that list. The next slide, please. And as I say, you know, measurement is really important. It allows you to understand the business opportunity, identify the hotspots, track your baseline, and you know, set targets for improving, and then benchmark yourself against others. And that's where standards come in, because how can you benchmark yourself against others if everyone's measuring in different ways? And that's what happened initially when we started working on food loss and waste. Everyone was doing it slightly differently, and you were trying to compare apples and pears. Now, we did some work to develop a food loss and waste sort of protocol of how you go about it, not how you actually measure, but how you define things. And that was a good starting point. But if we look at the next slide, please. It was really felt that there would be lots of benefits for having an ISO around food loss and waste. And initially, there was a thought that it should just be an ISO around measurement. But it's really, that would only be a half the story, because you then want to have something about management. So at the moment, we've now set up this subcommittee. It was sponsored by the government in Denmark. And the benefits, obviously, to provide consistency, comparability, and understand the progress. You know, how do you know you're on progress to halving food loss and waste? There are, of course, concerns about bureaucracies. We've got to make it simple. we don't want to have big barriers to entry, because otherwise people won't adopt it and won't use it. So we're trying to get that balance right between having something that's effective, but also easy to use and not cost prohibitive. And as I say, we've set up this subcommittee. The first things we're thinking about is, what's the scope? And we do want it to be right from farm through to household. And that immediately brings in problems of how, are you expecting measurement to happen at household level? How does that happen? So I think we want to make sure it covers the whole supply chain, but we're going to have to pick off bits and maybe have some separate guidance around households and some separate guidance around different sectors. The second thing which we're desperately keen to do is make sure we build on existing best practice, because as you saw on that earlier slide, there are a number of companies already doing things. RAPT has done a lot of measurements and developed a lot of best practice. They've developed a lot of tools. We don't want to start reinventing the wheel. We want to just build on what's good already out there. And we've had a couple of meetings, and there's been a big discussion about whether or not we should be trying to develop something that's standalone or something that's integrated. So you've all heard probably of 14001, and there's also a food safety standard, ISO 22000. There's a question, should we try to integrate into one of those standards, or should we have something standalone? And just to give you an example of some of the dilemmas we've been facing, quite a lot of the European countries are keen for it to be integrated into 14001, because a lot of businesses in Europe have 14001, and therefore it would be an easy add-on for them. But then we got a lot of pushback from Mauritius, in fact, because they said that not very many people in Mauritius have the ability to do 14001, and they wouldn't do it. So if it was integrated into 14001, you wouldn't get anybody in the developing countries using it. So we've got to find a way of balancing those different requirements. And we've got a group of wide different experiences, which is a great experience to chair this committee, because there are experts on standards who I know I can turn to them and say, okay, so what's the standards expertise on this? How should we be tackling this? And we've also got experts on food loss and waste. So bringing those two together has been a really valuable experience, and I think it will result in a great outcome. And I believe that was my last slide, but can we just flip over to the next one? Yeah, so really the purpose of today, I think, is for us to have a discussion, and Sarah, I think you were going to help facilitate that.
Absolutely, yes. I think, and thank you very much for that overview of not just the problem, but also some of the issues that the new subcommittee is hoping to tackle. It's a complex area, and I think the fact that you mentioned the need to really build on current best practices is absolutely key here, because of course people are already measuring and rating and doing various things, and it's about how do you present that in such a way? How do you give that to people in an effective and efficient way in order to bind everyone together so that they're doing something cohesively and coherently, which of course is what standards are about, doing something in a common agreed fashion. But it's a challenge. It's always a challenge, I think. And in this case, it's such a big issue that it's quite a complex one. How are people, has there been any conversation about, for example, if I can just start with my question, what kinds of standards would work, best? Maybe this is a program of work rather than just there's one standard. Maybe the principles of what needs to be done, it would be a good way to start to get everybody on the same page.
I think that's right.
Defining.
Yes, but I think
talking about terms and things.
Yeah, I think one of the early points was, let's get the definitions correct. So what are we, and probably the best way to do that is by destination. So you measure what goes to animal feed, you measure what goes to composting, you measure what goes to anaerobic digestion, you measure what goes to incineration. And because different places are going to have different, there's been a big discussion in the past about edible and inedible. So to our minds, the inedible would be things like tea bags or skins or bones. But there are lots of countries where they eat bits that we don't eat. And, you know, so you can't actually say, right, well, we're going to try and measure it edible food only. You're probably going to have to measure the whole lot, but then you want to define the end destinations, because that will help you to sort of take out things that really wouldn't have been edible by humans.
Well, yes, and I guess that, you know, there are so many issues around the circular economy and what bits could be used in other places, you know, how it could be repurposed, whether some of that edible food can be bioconverted in you know, insect proteins in some way if it reaches the right standard for that.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, lots of innovations coming through, and they would actually quite like to have something like the ISO, because it would allow them to fit, you know, to use the ISO to be a circular economy. And in fact, the circular economy committee is, I forget the phrase, is it liaison?
Yes, they're a liaison into your group. I would,
yeah.
And also I assume the environment committee.
Yes.
Is also there, and many of the others, I'm sure, and I'm sure everyone on this call is very sort of pretty well aware of some of you know, the work that's already been done in, you know, carbon footprinting, neutrality, biodiversity standards, and as well as the environmental management system standard, which you mentioned, Liz, which you know, is as you say, is used in some places, in larger organizations, in bigger countries perhaps, but not maybe all around the place. So somewhere like Mauritius may not be using that standard in the same way.
Exactly.
And also, of course, the key thing here is, if you're looking at a management system or a requirements or measurement standard, you know, to be clear that it's not that you know, we make standards. We don't then say to people, you have to use this as the basis of some kind of a scheme or ratings service of some sort. That's not the idea. You don't have to get certified to them just because they provide the measurements or in the clauses to do that. No. They can just be used by people. So
yes, it just provides a consistency.
Yes, absolutely. And that consistency is very important, particularly in this space where we need to see some changes very quickly. As you mentioned, the UN SDG halving food waste, you know, which is obviously having a massive impact on climate change and, you know, net zero and many other factors quite soon. I mean, there's quite a tough target, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, it is. It is very hard. And you know, when people first, there is still in businesses quite a hesitancy and a reluctance to actually measure and report. They might measure, but they won't report. But unless we get that sort of transparency, we're never going to actually accelerate the learning that is possible. Because, you know, all these organizations are keeping their data and their problems and their solutions to themselves, and we could make so much faster progress if there was more sharing of that. And it ought to be pre-competitive. It should not be something that is a commercial advantage. And all the work we've done demonstrates that there is a massive business case for businesses to reduce food loss and waste. You have to ask why they're not doing it already, and it's probably because they're too busy with other things and they don't really realize the benefits that are possible. But we did a piece of work a few years ago that suggested for the median organization, it was 14-to-1 payback on investment, and the investments required are often quite small, you know, around £10,000 to make that difference.
Absolutely. And one of the other key things about a standard in this space is it is another way of raising the profile and the importance. I mean, there are many levers at our sort of disposal as a society, as a planet, to help these issues that are really key to making a difference to some of the problems facing the planet. And you know, it's obviously policy and regulation and government intervention are really important, because otherwise things don't move. But then you've got people needing to get behind standards, which really kind of helped to raise that profile. A common standard in ISO is something that people are, they know it. It's got a recognizable a profile. People understand what it's for, what standards of what an ISO standard does, what international standards are intended to do, is to bring people together to try to do things in an agreed way, which is not to say we're fixing it down and not changing it, but because obviously they all change in use, but that there is, this is a something we can get around. This is a flagpole. Here we are, yes, you've got lots of different ways of doing things. None of those things are wrong, but let's just try to do it under an umbrella that we can all understand, so that we can really see the differences across the world, which I think is a very exciting thing. I think for yes. It's very aspirational, but hopefully it will work.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, it helps to mainstream something, so it's no longer seen as something that's niche, because it's part of how you do business. And a few years ago, back in 2015, it was almost unheard of for anyone to be measuring their food waste.
Yes, absolutely.
And now it's increasingly common. We need to get it to be the norm, that everyone's aware of food waste and trying to do something about it. And having the standard helps that.
Absolutely. One of the questions that we've got in, there's a question here about, with so much waste coming from household waste, so much food waste coming from there, they make the comment, actually more than a question, that some of this is misunderstanding on labeling, best before dates and things like that, rather than saying there are so many things that it's best before, rather than you have to use it by, because it's not going to go off if it's in some state of where it's dried or canned or whatever for a long time.
Yes.
I guess another thing, another area.
I mean, date labels have caused confusion, and it's been really hard to work out what percentage of food waste is down to date labels, because it's quite easy to use this as an excuse. But the retailers have done a lot in the last few years to try to improve the consistency. So there is now only one date on a product. I mean, I remember when I was a child that you'd go shopping and there'd be like 3 dates on a bag. So, how you know which one you're meant to follow. But there is now one date on each product. You are quite right that we ought to be getting rid of some of the best before dates. And some of the big retailers, Sainsbury's and Tesco, are removing best before dates on things like fruit and vegetables, because you can see an apple whether it's fit to eat or not. You don't need a date on it to tell you that it's gone past its best before date. So there, so there are some simple things like that, but dates are not the only cause. There are an awful lot of causes. We buy too much. We don't plan, so we buy too much and then we let it go off. And some of that is down to dates, but a lot of it is just we don't write a shopping list. We go shopping and we buy impulse, and we don't think about how many meals we've got, to manage, and who's going to be at home to eat, and so on and so forth. And then we cook too much and we don't use the leftovers. Those are the 2 big causes. So you buy too much and it goes off, or you cook too much and you don't use the leftovers. So those are the 2 main causes. And not using leftovers and cooking too much has nothing to do with the date labels. It's down to us getting the portion sizes wrong. It was really interesting during COVID lockdowns. During the first lockdown, there was about a 35% reduction in household food waste in the UK.
Wow.
And that was down to the fact that people were going shopping less often, and they were going with a shopping list. And then they would cook all at home, so they were cooking and they knew how many people would be at home, and they were able to plan their meals for the week. And meals became more of a focal point for families. So that was quite an interesting shift in behaviours caused by us all being forced to be at home. Unfortunately, as we came out of lockdown and returned to our old behaviours, the levels have gone up again. But it does show you can actually reduce food waste if you get some of those behaviours embedded.
Yes, but that behavioural change is one of the key things, and I guess one of the levers of as being a standard, you would hope that if we could get that really to sort of embedded in organizations, in the areas where they're being used, then people will start to be thinking a lot more about it, and that will help change behaviors. It's, you know, the trouble is a lot of these things can seem gradual, but as you just pointed out, in COVID, it happened very quickly, the behavioral change. So, you know, it's really about being able to sort of sound the clarion, isn't it? And say, look, this is really, really important. We have to do something. We can't just keep pretending that it's going to go away, because we've got very little time left in which to make a difference here.
And all the employees who work for businesses in the food sector are also consumers, and so they will get the messages home. And you know, you go into a restaurant or into a staff canteen, where, you know, all consumers come into interface with businesses that could be flying this flag by actually adopting the ISO.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think it would be really interesting to see how the work program shapes up, and I think, I mean, we've certainly got a lot of very interesting organisations in the UK committee that's supporting the UK committee, which is obviously providing representation into the ISO committee, but also I'm mentioning it here and now because I want people to be aware of the fact that we do have a BSI UK Food Committee, and that if you are interested, or you know of an organisation or a body that ought to perhaps be on there, and we can certainly check and see if they are or not. But we have got very good representation, both from government and also RAP, obviously, and other bodies, as well as industry. So we'd be, you know, we're looking forward to being able to really sort of leverage all of that expertise to really make this into something that will you know, will help in the long run. Will help the ISO fly.
Yeah, no, I think it's also an opportunity to fly the flag a bit for the UK, because the UK is still the single country in the world that knows the most about food waste.
Yes.
And you know, that's something that started by, you know, in RAP back in 2007 to 15, that period when we did a lot of research, and we did a lot of work with the retailers through the Quartile Commitment and through Love Food Hate Waste. There is no country anywhere in the world, and I mean, I've now been working for the last 6-7 years looking around, studying around the world. There is no other country that understands its
so mature in its thinking, is it? No, absolutely.
Yeah, so in a way, BSI and the UK has to help shape this ISO, because otherwise it won't be the best it could be.
Absolutely. I think it's vital that we sort of make sure that we've got we're really putting our you know, our minds and hearts behind this, to make it to help it to work really well for the world, really, because we need it.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wanted to chime in or ask Liz a question about her work at the WRI or on the ISO committee. Haven't had any other. They've got some other Q&As coming through or not? As if I mean, if you want to speak, I think we can unmute you. Oh, everyone's very quiet. I wondered if you were going to, in the in the standard, you know, thinking about measurement, how much of the referring, how much you think at the moment, or it might still be too early to tell if you're still at the scoping stage, you want to be considering some of these you know, different methods, or what you might do with some of the food waste, or methods of preventing the loss in the first place, if those things will be referenced, do you think?
I expect,
or not?
I expect they'll be referenced. I think what we'll end up doing is probably breaking the breaking the supply chain down a bit, so we have some sector-specific guidance. And some of those will bump into food repurposing and upcycling and things like that. Last year in September, the UN Food Systems Summit, I was the co-chair for the stream of work on food loss and waste. And we developed quite a lot of a sort of general package of initiatives that would help to prevent loss and waste. And that included, one of the initiatives was all around circular economy and upcycling and trying to make sure that food never sort of fell out of the circle. So really making the food system a more circular process. And now doing the standards work, you can see how the standards can impact all the initiatives in that cluster that we developed for the Food Systems Summit.
That sounds very interesting, actually. Could people access that from the Food Systems Summit pages on the UN FAO, or how would they get hold of that information?
Probably email me.
No, okay, email you. Okay, fine.
I mean, I think there is some information on the Summit website, but it's pretty limited.
Yeah, I mean, we had an interesting session, I think it was last summer. We did a food innovation and sustainability impacts webinar, and we talked to people who were repurposing coffee grounds, who were repurposing used vegetable oil into energy sources, and amongst other things. So that was an interesting conversation. That was. It was, and also repurposing sort of brewery waste and distillery waste into algae, feeding algae stocks instead of to get omega-3 rather than using fish stock. So that was an interesting one.
No, there are lots of great ideas and innovations coming out, and they're all good. We just need to find ways of facilitating those, and governments finding ways of facilitating that as well, because there's the whole defining the point of it, defining something as a waste is a big problem. So you need to find ways to define the point when it's no longer a waste.
Exactly.
Otherwise it falls under waste management legislation. And
making it sort of, and just this systemization, which of course, a standard, an overarching standard could really start to help people to find ways into that. I think they can point at the stand and say, these are the principles. This is simple. We can understand what we ought to be trying to do here.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Liz. That's really helpful. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm sorry about the initial technical problems we had. I apologise both to you and to the people on the call, in the virtual session rather. I think that's probably us wrapped up for the. Oh, I've got a few things in the chat. Hang on. We've got some. Has any research been done into quantifying the link between reducing food waste and broader efforts to reduce GHG emissions?
Well, only in the sense that we know how much of the greenhouse gas emissions is contributed by food waste. Yes. So that's the main one. We've done a lot of, there's been quite a bit of research in the last couple of years to actually look at the different types of food and the different types of food waste to see which ones are the really big items. And not surprisingly, the big items are things like meat, because they've got quite a long chain of impacts, whereas fruit and vegetables are less. So that it all encourages us to have a more sustainable diet, because having more fruit and vegetables and less meat is probably a more sustainable diet in terms of being good nutrition as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Indeed.
And on that note, thank you very much, Liz, for joining us today. And we wish you well. And we obviously pledge our support for the continuing work in ISO on food loss and waste.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope to speak to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.